Okay, I want you to notice how the power lines merge inward and downward the further they are away from you. And the same thing when you look down a long corridor or a hallway. Notice how the lights on the ceiling merge downward and they seem to get smaller the further away they are. The same way with the doors, the same way with the floor. See how everything merges in and gets smaller? And you'll see the same thing here with the street lamps. Notice how they merge inward and downward the further away they are from you. And you'll see the same thing with railroad tracks. Notice how they merge inward and seem to get smaller towards the end and eventually disappear off into the horizon. And the same thing here. Notice how the tracks merge inward and seem to get smaller. So do the street lamps and the tiers to the right as they fade off into the horizon. Remembering the ground is level and the objects are in a straight line, just like the bottles that we have on the table here. Notice they're all in a perfect straight line and they're all level. But watch what happens when we change the angle of perspective, as you can see here. Now, notice how all the bottles merge inward and seem to get smaller towards the end of the table. Now, if this table were longer, the bottles would disappear just like the street lamps and the railroad tracks, because they're going beyond the vanishing point, beyond the limit of our vision. Well, the sun does the same thing, as you can see here. Notice how it merges inward and downward and appears to get smaller in size the further that it moves away from you. It's just going out of your perspective. For instance, look at these street lights. Notice the one up close looks larger, and then they appear to get smaller the further away, and they merge inward and go downward. That's all due to perspective. These street lamps are not going over a curve. They're just going out of your line of sight. So, as you can see, the sun does not set nor does it rise. It only moves in and out of your perspective, your line of sight. And once it moves beyond the vanishing point, you just can't see it anymore. Kind of like a sunrise, for example. Take these street lamps. See how they merge inward and they seem large up close and they seem to get smaller the further away? Well, the same thing happens with a sunrise. If you watch the sun rise, as you can see here, notice how the further away the sun is, the smaller it appears. And as it gets closer, it appears to get larger, just like the street lamps, just like the railroad tracks, just like a hallway. It's all due to perspective, and it also depends on your location, where you are positioned at when you are looking at the object that is moving away from you or moving toward you. Now, some people will see the sun directly over the head moving in a straight line, depending on which time of the year it is and what country you're in. But as you notice here, the sun appears to get smaller the further that it moves away, just like the street lamps. It's not going over a curve. It's just going out of your line of sight. And like I said, also it depends on your location and your position. Say, for instance, here, notice how the street lamps seem to merge to the left and downward. Okay, now watch as we move directly in line with them. Now you see how they're all in a straight line, merging downward towards the horizon. Now watch what happens when we get on this side of them. Okay, now notice how they merge inward and downward to the right. Like I said, it all depends on your location and where you're positioned at as the sun passes and is moving out of your line of sight. For example, if I move this bulb across this string, which is tied perfectly level across this countertop, it just looks like it's moving in a straight line. But let's look at it from down on the flat earth point of view, using the line of bottles as our horizon. As you can see, the light bulb is not going over a curve. It's going straight across the counter, across the string. It just appears that way due to perspective. Now, for example, let's look at it on a smaller scale. Take a person that is walking away from you, like right here. You notice the field goal and the bleachers are all at ground level. Now watch what happens when the guy walks beyond your perspective, beyond your line of sight. Now you see, if this flat football field continued on, you eventually wouldn't see this guy anymore. He would disappear totally out of your line of sight. Now, we all know that there's no big curve in the middle of this football field. If it was, it'd be one heck of a game, right? So now I hope you can understand that the sun does not set nor does it rise. It merely only moves out of your line of sight due to perspective.